Empire. Markine had already tried to capitalize on the fraught nature of the relationship between those two countries, but their military strength was reduced to the point where they had little ability to put up any meaningful opposition. They had their hands full just trying to keep the country from collapsing. Bigot Mercenal, the captain of the 3rd unit of Markine's mercenary company, led 10 of his men into the depths of the forest. Ijin Forest, as it was called, was infested with monsters. Since time immemorial, the ruler of this area had forbidden passage through it, or so those who lived nearby unanimously declared. Woodcutters even refused to enter Ijin Forest. This meant passing through with troops was impossible. Even in the current battle, Markine's 2 enemy countries avoided approaching the forest. King Markine decided to take advantage of that.
You! Give me all your money!
What are you doing?
I'm mugging you!
With that stance?
What? What are you talking about? Just give me your money, old man!
With a poor stance, you are unbalanced and you can be easily knocked over. With a solid stance, you are a much more serious threat. Much better. But to tell you the truth, you do not look like the criminal type.
I know. I'm just confused. So you really think I could be a good masseur?
Of course.
This is so great. No one has ever believed in me.
While it is always best to believe in oneself, a little help from others can be a great blessing. Happy birthday, my son. If only I could have helped you. Leaves from the vine, falling so slow, like fragile, tiny shells, drifting in the foam. Little soldier boy, come marching home.
Their troops would break through the forest and launch a surprise attack on one of their 2 enemies. A simple but effective plan. That said, Markine's military strength was not what it used to be. Just the act of invading the forest would reduce their numbers greatly when they were accosted by various beasts. Forget launching a strong surprise attack, it seemed they would only be squandering resources. That was where their strategy came into play. In the previous battle they had secured several Bronze Empire suits of armor. They would have some of their soldiers don these, then attack the Dekuto Empire from behind. The 2 countries had formed a temporary alliance until Markine was vanquished. Once that was over, the 2 would inevitably begin fighting for control over the land they had conquered. Even now tensions ran high as both countries began considering what methods would be most beneficial to them. It would only take one small push for their alliance to snap, creating conflict between them. That was Markine's aim. Bigot Mercenal, known for being daring and resolute, was put in charge of the operation. He would pass through the forest and launch a powerful sneak attack with a small company of mercenaries. It was an incredibly dangerous endeavor. They would not come back alive even if they succeeded. In fact, they might have to take their own lives to avoid capture. They couldn't bring anything that may give away their identity. No one could know who they were or where they came from. There was no honor to be had from this mission. Instead, they would die as traitors. Despite that, Bigot said to Markine, "Do not worry, for tales of us shall be passed on. We will live on as the heroes that led this country to victory during one of its great battles, just like the legendary twin gods Megas and Gummis." Is that not an honor by itself? Bigot took on this duty, seeing the similarity between himself and the legendary heroes of 400 years ago who died in battle against Laplace. He had 10 men under his command. 3 were intermediate-tier North God-style swordfighters, while the other 7 were mercenaries unassociated with the 3 sword styles. Vigort himself was an advanced-tier sword god-style swordsman, but their group had no healer and none among them were particularly skilled. In these parts, magicians were valuable assets to parties, but since they were preparing for the final battle, Marking couldn't afford to assign any to a team of throwaway pawns. True victory meant the country had to both trigger warfare between its enemies, then capitalize on that opportunity and come out triumphant. Humph, never thought I would be doing something like this, Vigort thought, laughing in self-derision. Vigort was destined to be a mercenary. He was born into a mercenary band. His father died in battle while his mother was pregnant with him, and his mother died in battle not long after he was born. He was sold as a slave and bought by what would eventually become the Marking Mercenary Company. That was where he learned about swordplay and battle. Ever since then he had lived only for money and survival. He never dreamed that at the end of it all, he would be battling for honor. As if I'm a knight from some kingdom, he thought. Everyone knew knights were the only ones who died for honor. But then it occurred to Vigort. Maybe I am a knight. A knight of Marking. It made him proud to think that way. For the longest time, he hadn't belonged anywhere. It was only through great hardship that he had come to be able to call Marking his home. Now he would fight to protect it. He'd mocked those ideals in the past for being sucky, but now that he was in a similar position, they didn't seem so bad after all. Commander, just a little farther. Don't let your guard down. Now that we've come this far, we don't want to be killed by humans. Haha, true enough. Until that point, they had encountered few monsters. They had been walking the entire day and only had 2 run-ins. It was like a miracle. Despite that, he had lost one of his men. They had been moving as carefully as possible, but hidden in the overgrowth was a red-leaf tiger. It attacked, unseen, and 1 soldier died. But the beast was already heavily injured and seemed to be running from someone. The red-leaf tiger was the most fearsome of the beasts in this forest. Just who in the world could have done that? Could it be the person who rules over this forest? Vigort wondered. He had heard rumors of the forest's ruler before. Carantosaurus, an A-class beast with a giant, lizard-like body over 5 meters in length. He didn't know if it really existed or not, but if it did, it would surely be capable of leaving a B-class red-leaf tiger in critical condition. That also meant that if they were attacked by such a creature, neither he nor his 9 remaining men would get out unscathed. So he pressed on even more cautiously than before. Fortunately, he had experience maneuvering through a forest, enough to avoid encountering any monsters. If he happened to encounter any, he at least had the strength to kill it before it called for help. So long as they managed that, they would be fine. Sadly, Vigort and his men weren't the only ones who thought so. What? Before Vigort realized what was happening, he and his men had run into another group. This party numbered 10 as well. Together, they made a group of 20 men, all of them clad in armor of the Bros Empire. The only difference was that Vigort and his men were fakes. You there, give us the name of your unit. A man clad in lustrous, striking armor stood before Vigort, demanding he identify himself. Draw your swords. Let none return alive. Vigort ignored the question and instead shouted at his men, who drew their swords and leapt at the enemy. Deserters, huh? Die. The Bros Empire commander labeled them thus after they launched their attack. He was mistaken, but that didn't change what had to be done. Kill them. Bros doesn't need cowards who run from battle. The Bros soldiers were swift. Gar. Damn it. In the blink of an eye, 2 of Vigort's men had been cut down. In mere moments they were on the defensive. The Bros Empire's soldiers were incredibly skilled. He didn't know it at the time, but they were actually fighting against the Emperor's personal bodyguards. What were bodyguards doing here in the forest, away from the Emperor? It was because of something that happened an hour ago. The Bros Emperor was personally walking through their military camp to inspire his soldiers when a beast suddenly sprang out of the forest and attacked. The creature was quickly dispatched, but the Emperor sustained a small scratch from the struggle, and was given medical treatment afterward. Still, the fact remained that he had been attacked right before his soldiers' very eyes. Sensing a drop in morale, the Emperor ordered his bodyguards to march. "Go forth and fetch the hide of a great, fierce beast," he commanded. Then he could claim that he fought the felled creature, and that was how he had sustained such a wound. The bodyguards immediately set out into the forest. Mysteriously enough, they didn't encounter any beasts, but instead came upon Vigalt and his party. WHY here? The strongest of Vigalt's men was easily slain by the Bros bodyguards. I'm sure you already know, but I am the captain of the Emperor's Guard, Klein Dynalters. Water Saint Klein. Do you seriously think you can win? Damn it. Cease your resistance and surrender, then you may at least have your lives. Vigalt panicked. There was no way they could surrender. If they were caught and investigated, they would be exposed as pretenders. Markeen would fall. After that, the Bros Empire and Dikuto Kingdom would fight. He didn't know who would win, but either way the country he had such fond memories of would disappear. On the other hand, he had no other options. They were clearly outmatched, and if this continued any longer, their destruction would be inevitable. I'm sorry, Markeen. Vigalt apologized to the comrades he held in esteem within his heart. That was when it happened. Grah! A gigantic lizard came flying at them. Its body, all 5 meters of it, was a vivid green, and its majestic form was riddled with open wounds, blood pouring out of them. Red bubbles came foaming out of its mouth as it moved between the two opposing groups and collapsed. Then, just a moment after that, a wild beast came leaping out after it. This beast let out a fierce war cry as it landed upon the lizard's head and drove its sword through it. The lizard let out a final, anguished cry before it died. Gah! There was no time for them to process what had just happened. Even after slaying the lizard, the wild beast didn't stop moving. It sprang to the ground and, in the blink of an eye, cut down 2 of the Emperor's bodyguards. What are you doing? For a moment Vigalt thought this had to be the ruler of the forest. However, this wild beast had the form of a human. Warm brown skin, fiery red hair, and 2 fully erect beastfolk ears. It also held a sword. A sword that had a thin, one-sided blade, which gleamed an eerie red color, and had an inscription on it. "Who are you?" yelled Klein, the captain of the bodyguards, as he stepped forward. "GRRR." The beast didn't answer. It merely responded to the presence of an enemy wielding a sword in front of it. Gah! Fight back! With a battle cry, the beast slashed at Klein. Klein was a water saint. The water god style was a school of swordplay that allowed one to fend off any attack and launch a deadly counter in return. At least, that was supposed to be the case. The long sword of light. So, this is the sword god style? When the beast's sword met Klein's blade broke in 2. Then a split formed in Klein's armor as the attack sundered his clothing, skin, muscle, and finally bone in succession. That was when Klein's lower and upper half separated. The Bros bodyguards didn't even flinch as their commander's torso fell in front of them with a wet thud. How dare you! Our commander. We'll avenge him. They were all sword fighters of intermediate tier in either the water god or sword god style. They were undeniably strong. And yet, Gah! The beast howled. With each swing of its blood-red blade, one by one those men were vivisected. The beast moved like a flash of light. Its voice was enough to make one recoil. No one was any match for it. In moments, the entire guard was wiped out. Vigalt and his men couldn't even move. They had no idea what had just happened. The beast had appeared out of nowhere and, in an overwhelming show of strength, destroyed everything in its path. But why? For what purpose? GRRR. It was looking their way. Reason had fled from its eyes. Eyes that now fixated on Beagalt and his men, full of bloodlust, amplifying their fear. The clothes it wore were revealing, but terror overwhelmed any sense of attraction they may have felt. That Beagalt and his men were fakes. You there, give us the name of your unit. A man clad in lustrous, striking armor stood before Beagalt, demanding he identify himself. Draw your swords. Let none return alive. Beagalt ignored the question and instead shouted at his men, who drew their swords and leapt at the enemy. Deserters, ha? Die. The Bros Empire commander labeled them thus after they launched their attack. He was mistaken, but that didn't change what had to be done. Kill them. Bros doesn't need cowards who run from battle. The Bros soldiers were swift. Gar. Damn it. In the blink of an eye, 2 of Beagalt's men had been cut down. In mere moments they were on the defensive. The Bros Empire's soldiers were incredibly skilled. He didn't know it at the time, but they were actually fighting against the Emperor's personal bodyguards. What were bodyguards doing here in the forest, away from the Emperor? It was because of something that happened an hour ago. The Bros Emperor was personally walking through their military camp to inspire his soldiers when a beast suddenly sprang out of the forest and attacked. The creature was quickly dispatched, but the Emperor sustained a small scratch from the struggle, and was given medical treatment afterward. Still, the fact remained that he had been attacked right before his soldiers' very eyes. Sensing a drop in morale, the Emperor ordered his bodyguards to march. Go forth and fetch the hide of a great, fierce beast, he commanded. Then he could claim that he fought the felled creature, and that was how he had sustained such a wound. The bodyguards immediately set out into the forest. Mysteriously enough, they didn't encounter any beasts, but instead came upon Beagalt and his party. WHY here? The strongest of Beagalt's men was easily slain by the Bros bodyguards. I'm sure you already know, but I am the captain of the Emperor's Guard, Klein Dynalters. Water Saint Klein. Do you seriously think you can win? Damn it. Cease your resistance and surrender, then you may at least have your lives. Beagalt panicked. There was no way they could surrender. If they were caught and investigated, they would be exposed as pretenders. Markeen would fall. After that, the Bros Empire and Dikuto Kingdom would fight. He didn't know who would win, but either way the country he had such fond memories of would disappear. On the other hand, he had no other options. They were clearly outmatched, and if this continued any longer, their destruction would be inevitable. I'm sorry, Markeen. Beagalt apologized to the comrades he held in esteem within his heart. That was when it happened. Rah! A gigantic lizard came flying at them. Its body, all 5 meters of it, was a vivid green, and its majestic form was riddled with open wounds, blood pouring out of them. Red bubbles came foaming out of its mouth as it moved between the 2 opposing groups and collapsed. Then, just a moment after that, a wild beast came leaping out after it. This beast let out a fierce war cry as it landed upon the lizard's head and drove its sword through it. The lizard let out a final, anguished cry before it died. Gar. There was no time for them to process what had just happened. Even after slaying the lizard, the wild beast didn't stop moving. It sprang to the ground and, in the blink of an eye, cut down 2 of the Emperor's bodyguards. What are you doing? For a moment Beagalt thought this had to be the ruler of the forest. However, this wild beast had the form of a human. Warm brown skin, fiery red hair, and 2 fully erect beast-folk ears. It also held a sword. A sword that had a thin, one-sided blade, which gleamed an eerie red color, and had an inscription on it. Who are you? Yelled Klein, the captain of the bodyguards, as he stepped forward. GRR. The beast didn't answer. It merely responded to the presence of an enemy wielding a sword in front of it. Gar. Fight back. With a battle cry, the beast slashed at Klein. Klein was a water saint. The water god style was a school of swordplay that allowed one to fend off any attack and launch a deadly counter in return. At least, that was supposed to be the case. The long sword of light. So, this is the sword god style? When the beast's sword met Klein's blade broke in two. Then a split formed in Klein's armor as the attack sundered his clothing, skin, muscle, and finally bone in succession. That was when Klein's lower and upper half separated. The bros' bodyguards didn't even flinch as their commander's torso fell in front of them with a wet thud. How dare you? Our commander. We'll avenge him. They were all sword fighters of intermediate tier in either the water god or sword god style. They were undeniably strong. And yet, Gar. The beast howled. With each swing of its blood-red blade, one by one those men were vivisected. The beast moved like a flash of light. Its voice was enough to make one recoil. No, we'll avenge him. They were all sword fighters of intermediate tier in either the water god or sword god style. They were undeniably strong. And yet, Gar. The beast howled. With each swing of its blood-red blade, one by one those men were vivisected. The beast moved like a flash of light. Its voice was enough to make one recoil. No one was any match for it. In moments, the entire guard was wiped out. Vigort and his men couldn't even move. They had no idea what had just happened. The beast had appeared out of nowhere and, in an overwhelming show of strength, destroyed everything in its path. But why? For what purpose? Grrrr. It was looking their way. Reason had fled from its eyes. Eyes that now fixated on Vigort and his men, full of bloodlust, amplifying their fear. The clothes it wore were revealing, but terror overwhelmed any sense of attraction they may have felt. That was right, this beast was a woman. It had a woman's form. As soon as he realized that, the gears turned in the back of Vigort's mind. It was the story of the sword saint that taught him swordplay. That sword saint was a just and honorable warrior of the sword god style who had trained in the holy land of swords. They wouldn't tell him why they decided to become a mercenary, but they did talk about their prior training experience. One of the other people there was violent, wouldn't listen to anyone. She was almost like a mad dog. She surpassed me and became a sword king, but she wasn't a bad person, just an idiot. Everyone hated her because she lost control in extreme situations and went mad, attacking everyone, whether they be friend or foe. The sword fighter in that tale was the woman in front of him now. That description fit exactly. By any chance, he called out to her as he slipped into the god sword style bow his teacher had taught him, bending to one knee and tucking his head forward, showing respect and submission. Are you the sword king, Lady Ghislaine Dedeldia? The moment he said that, the beast stilled. After a short time, Ghislaine regained her sense of reason. I have often heard rumors, but I never dreamed I would meet you in a place like this. She didn't respond to his words. Instead she glared at him with her bloodshot eyes and questioned him very matter-of-factly. You there, have you seen a girl around 12 years old with pure red hair? Or a boy of about 10 who's a proficient mage? No, I haven't. He shook his head, thinking her words over. A red-haired girl of approximately 12. A magician boy of approximately 10. He had seen many slaves like that in his life, but none of them around this area. Besides, this was the Aegean forest. It was a place filled with beasts. Why did she think there would be children in a place like this? I see. Sorry to get in your way. Ghislaine began walking away. After a few steps she suddenly stopped and looked back, her head cocked. By the way, where is this? Vigort, too, cocked his head. He told her she was in the conflict zone, located on the northernmost part of the southern half of the central continent. He then explained they were in a forest within the northern part of Marquine mercenary country. Vigort and his men were in the middle of an operation. They didn't really have the luxury of time to explain, but she had just spared their lives, and if they upset her, they might be next. This was his attempt at crisis management. Impossible. Ghislaine was in disbelief. She didn't understand how she had ended up here. Bigot asked for the details of her situation. She had been acting as the bodyguard for a young girl in Arsura Kingdom's Fitoa region, when they were attacked. Before she knew what was happening, she had been swallowed by some light, and had ended up in this forest. As she fought hordes of monsters, she lost herself to the excitement of battle and turned into a berserker that killed anything that came near her. In any case, this is the conflict zone's Markine mercenary country. Make no mistake about it. So it is. Ghislaine stopped to think. Bigot had no idea what she was thinking about. After 5 long seconds, she finally looked up at the sky. Then I have to go south to return to Arsura. Using the sun to guide her, she turned straight south. That was the same direction that Bigot and his men were heading. Please wait. There's an enemy camp set up in that direction. And what about it? What about it? I mean, what are you planning to do? Anyone who gets in my way gets cut down, that's all. There was a ferocity in her eyes that made him doubt if she was still in possession of reason. Bigot had no words. Just what had her so stirred up? Hopefully Rudius is with Lady Eris, but there's a chance they were both transported somewhere else just like I was. I have to hurry. After hearing that, he understood. We're not that different, he thought. Those 2 children, particularly the red-haired girl, were more important than anything to the Sword King. She was desperate to protect that which was precious to her. In that case, why don't we travel part of the way together? We also have something to take care of in that direction. Very well. For some reason Bigot felt particularly proud. Although their objectives differed, he felt like he was standing side by side with this Sword King, fighting for something he wanted to protect. Bigot, his men, and Ghislaine slipped out from the forest and attacked the Dekuto kingdom from behind. Their luck was good. As soon as the battle with Markine began, all the troops were focused on what was in front of them. The Brose Emperor found it suspicious that his bodyguards had failed to return. He suspected the Dekuto kingdom was planning an ambush for his troops, and that his bodyguards had been killed after discovering their plot. After all, the Dekuto king's main army was close to the forest. It seemed likely they had troops hiding further within. In truth, the Dekuto king was a coward and had camped with his back to the forest so he wouldn't be caught in a surprise attack by the Brose Empire. The combination of these factors would later lead to Bigot's success. Ghislaine howled and Bigot let out a fierce cry as he led his men into battle. They charged right into the enemy camp where the Dekuto king's tent was set up. The king was startled by their surprise attack. Seeing their armor, he immediately thought the Brose Emperor had launched a sneak attack from the forest. He hailed a nearby attendant and commanded an assault on the Brose Empire. Then he tried to take shelter from the chaos. It was only 10 seconds later when Ghislaine tore the Dekuto king asunder with her blade, killing him. If he had lived, he might have realized Bigot and his men were not of the Brose Empire and retracted his orders, but an imperial edict had absolute power. The Dekuto kingdom surged into battle against the Brose Empire. The Brose Empire had predicted such an attack would come, so while they were caught off guard by its timing, they were able to put up a fight. That was when the Markine mercenary country took up arms. It was a 3-pronged free-for-all. Bigot found himself surrounded by enemies, but he was still alive. It was his mission to die deceiving the Dekuto kingdom into thinking his attack was the work of the Brose Empire, yet still he clung to life. He and his men had already been separated, and the only ally close to him was a single fighter. There, right in front of him, he followed in the shadow of her tanned back as the light of her sword flashed, cutting through the enemy. He had never seen such a reliable figure before. He felt so proud to be protecting her flank. At last they could no longer see the armor of the Dekuto kingdom around them. Instead, they were surrounded by soldiers of the Brose Empire. While the Empire was surprised by the intrusion of a woman with a blood-red blade, they had watched her cut down the Dekuto kingdom's men and noticed Bigot protecting her flank in his Brose armor. They mistook Bigot and Ghislaine for allies. That was when Markine surged in. The 2 allied countries were shaken as the battle started up behind them. Not only had their bond alliance broken, but their formations as well. Markine, which should have been at a disadvantage, broke through their front lines. A chaotic battle ensued. Amidst the violent fighting, Bigot became separated from Gislen, but managed to rejoin his comrades. Shouts of joy rang out from the Markine mercenaries as they recognized Bigot and took up a firm position around him. Instead of falling back, Bigot remained on the front lines and kept fighting. The battle raged on, the soldiers covered in mud and blood, not fully aware of what was happening around them. Bigot took an arrow in his left eye. Anguished, he searched for the bowman responsible. That was when he saw it. He watched as it happened. Below an eye-catching banner, dressed in luxurious bronze armor, was a man with a black beard. Bigot saw the flash of red as that man, the Emperor of Bros, had his head sliced off by a brown-skinned woman. Ha, ha, ha ha ha. He laughed, and as he laughed, the battle wore on. And he lived. The final battle ended in victory for the Markine mercenary country. Thanks to his achievements, Bigot Mercenal earned the position of general. He was celebrated as a legendary hero for having succeeded in a suicide mission and for executing Dikuto's king. After that, Bigot Mercenal continued to do spectacular work that resulted in him being known as one of the most outstanding great generals of the Markine mercenary country. That, however, is a story for another time. Once that decisive battle was over, the great General Bigot started doing something strange. He started wearing a necklace that had the profile of a female beastfolk chiseled into it, and began painting the blade of his sword red. It's a good luck charm. His men began to imitate him, and those who heard their tales followed suit. These customs continued spreading until they took their modern-day shape. When asked what kind of good luck charm it was, Bigot responded thus: "I was helped by a goddess during that battle. I'm following her example." It was from his words that the forest goddess Lane was created. The name Gislen was difficult for those in the southern part of the central continent to pronounce, and so her name, altered by their accents, became Lane. She appeared from the forest, rescuing the life of the great general, becoming the goddess of salvation. Forest goddess Lane. For the next 100 years she was worshipped as Markine's goddess of protection, providing support to the hearts of many soldiers. Of course, the real Gislen had no knowledge of this designation. Where did Gislen go after that? Was she still alive? Did she survive that battle and go on home to Asura Kingdom? Was she able to meet that precious young mistress of hers again? Bigot Mercenal had no way of knowing.
Double kill.
Jobless Reincarnation. Volume 3. Chapter 1. The Con Artist Who Claimed to Be a God. I was dreaming. In this dream, I was soaring through the air, holding Eris in my arms. My mind was hazy, but somehow I knew that I was flying. The world around me was a constantly changing blur of shapes and colors. I rocketed through the air like a sound wave or particle of light, my body randomly bouncing in different directions. I didn't know why this was happening. But I was certain of one thing: no matter what I tried, I was going to lose speed eventually, and plunge to the ground. So I concentrated. I looked at the ever-shifting scenery below us, trying to find a relatively safe place to land. Why did I feel the need to do this? Good question. Something inside me was just screaming that I had to, if I wanted to survive. Still, we were going way too fast. It was like staring into the wheels of a slot machine, except everything was moving much, much faster. Focusing more intently, I gathered magical energy into my eyes, and for just a moment, we suddenly slowed down. Oh crap. I'm gonna fall. Panic welled in my chest, but I could now see the land below me clearly. I needed to find a field. Falling into the sea or smashing into a mountain wouldn't be good. Forests were obviously dangerous, but if I managed to aim for a field, I forced myself downward, hoping for the best. Our velocity slowed rapidly as I plunged toward a reddish-brown stretch of earth. An instant later, I lost consciousness. When I opened my eyes, I found myself in a pure white void. I immediately knew this wasn't real. It had to be some sort of lucid dream. Yet, for some reason, my body felt oddly heavy. Huh? I looked down at myself, and my eyes went wide. I was back in the old, familiar form I'd spent 34 years in. At the sight of it, memories of my previous life came flooding back. I was the same bitter, vile, insecure, and selfish piece of trash I'd always been. The 10 years I spent as Rudeus suddenly felt like nothing more than a dream. A crushing wave of disappointment washed over me. I'd reverted to my pathetic, former self, and I found that fact all too easy to accept. So it really was just a dream, huh? As dreams go, it lasted an awfully long time. But at the end of the day, it was too good to be true. I'd been born into a loving family, and managed to get friendly with some very cute girls. Not a bad 10 years by any means. I'd wanted to enjoy that life a little more, though. Oh well. Guess it's over now. I could feel the memories of my time as Rudeus beginning to fade. Once you've woken up, even the best of dreams melt away in no time. Had I really expected anything different? Please. A smooth, happy life like that was never in the cards for a guy like me. Eventually, I noticed that a weirdo had appeared in front of me. The individual in question had a blank, white face, marked only by a big, wide grin. Maybe blank wasn't the right word. I just couldn't make out any distinguishing features. When I looked at any specific part of that face, it slipped instantly out of my memory. My mind refused to form an image of the larger whole. It almost felt as if this person was being blurred out by a pixelated mosaic. Still, I somehow sensed that I was dealing with someone calm and patient. Hey there. Nice to meet you, Rudeus. I'd been so busy feeling sorry for myself, and now I had some weird, censored porno guy chatting me up. Actually, that voice was pretty ambiguous. Could be a guy or a girl. Let's go with girl. That would make the pixelated thing feel kind of sexy, right? Hello. Can you hear me? Oh. Yeah. Sure. Hi there, nice to meet you. Excellent. Nice to see you're so polite. I didn't actually speak out loud, but it seems like my friend here heard my thoughts just fine. Might as well keep communicating this way. Wow. Nothing phases you, does it? That's not true at all. Hey. Don't be so modest. So anyway, you're, who or what, exactly? Can't you see that much for yourself? I can't see much of anything with that mosaic. Are you the mighty Sperman or something? The mighty Sperman? Who's that? Does he look like me? Oh, totally. He's a big blurry mess of pixels, just like you. So there's someone like me in your world too? Well, no. Not really. What? Okay, let's just move on. I'm a god. The man god, specifically. The man god. Right. You don't sound too impressed, I have to say. Just wondering why a god would be wasting time chatting with me, I guess. Isn't it a little late for you to be showing up anyway? The god's supposed to make his appearance way back in the first chapter, right? The first chapter? What do you mean? Never mind, it's nothing. Please, go right on ahead. All right. Anyway, I've been keeping an eye on you for some time now. You've been living quite the interesting life. Peeping's always lots of fun, isn't it? Oh, it's been a joy, and that's why I decided to take care of you. You're taking care of me? Gee, thanks. Talk about condescending. What am I, your pet? Come now, there's no need to be so hostile. I'm only talking to you because I saw you were in some real trouble. Well, that's a red flag. Anybody who pops up offering to fix all your problems when you're struggling is a con man. No, no. I'm on your side, friend. Ha. Now we're friends? Don't make me laugh. I met a few people like you in my old life, buddy. People who slithered up to me and said, just try your best, or, I'll look out for you. They were all liars. They didn't really give a damn. They assumed everything would automatically work out once they lured me out of my room. None of them understood the source of the problem. Everything you say reminds me of them. I'll never trust you. Goodness, that's a problem. Why don't I just offer you a little advice then? Advice, huh? That's right, feel free to ignore it completely, if you want. Right. Got it. So that's your angle. I had plenty of that last time as well. People loved giving me advice. Thought they could feed me a bunch of feel-good self-help crap and get me focused on something other than my own misery. Seriously, talk about missing the point. What good is positive thinking going to do me now? I'm way past the stage where my emotional state's going to make a difference. Getting optimistic only sets me up for more pain down the line. I mean, this right here's a case in point. Why even let me dream, damn it? Alternate reality my ass. I got all into this second chance at life, then you just pull the carpet out from under me? Did you have to be so damn sadistic? Wait a second. I think you're misunderstanding things. I want to help you with your current life, not your old one. Why do I look like this then? That's your astral form. It's distinct from your actual body. My astral form? Right, you're perfectly fine physically, of course. So, this is only a dream? When I wake up, I won't find myself back in this crappy body? Exactly. Since you're dreaming at the moment, you'll be back to normal once you wake up. Feel better now? Phew. Okay. So this is all just some weird dream. Well, it's not just a dream. I'm speaking directly into your mind right now. Hard to believe your mental image of yourself is so different from your body. Telepathy, huh? Well, all right. But what do you actually want with me? Do you plan to send me back to my old world? Since I don't belong here or whatever? Don't be ridiculous. I couldn't send you anywhere outside the six-faced world, obviously. Humph. Maybe that's obvious to you, but I'm totally in the dark here. A very reasonable point. Wait a minute though. If you can't send me back, you can't be the one who reincarnated me in this world, right? True. Reincarnation isn't really my department anyway. That's the specialty of a certain wicked dragon god. HRM. We've got an evil dragon, too, huh? Anyway, do you want my advice or not? No thanks. Huh? Why not? I don't know what's going on here, but you're obviously a shady character. That means I'm better off ignoring you completely. Or, do I really seem that shady? Oh hell yes. You couldn't act more like a conman if you tried. Reminds me of those scammers I used to run into playing MMOs. The instant you let yourself get into a conversation, they were already messing with your head. I'm not a conman. I won't even ask you to follow my advice, okay? That's just another part of your strategy. Come on. Trust me. You're awfully whiny for a deity. Look. It's not like I even worship you, whoever you are. The only God I care about is the one who actually made the miracle of my reincarnation happen. Why would I trust some other guy who pops into my head and says all sorts of weird crap? Oh, and people who talk about trust are always liars. Words of wisdom from one of my favorite books. Come on, don't be so stubborn. Just give me one little chance. Now you just sound like a loser ex-boyfriend trying to get back with the girl who dumped him. Look, buddy. How many prayers do you think I said in my former life? You never came to the rescue back then. Not even once, right up until the day I died. Why offer me advice now? I'm not from your old world, remember? I'm a god of this world, and I'm saying that I'll help you out from now on. Right. And I'm saying I can't trust you. Talk is cheap. If you want me to believe you, show me a miracle or something.
This doesn't count as a miracle.
How many people do you know can communicate with you through your dreams?
What's so special about a little communication?
Anybody can do that. You just write a letter or whatever. Well, true enough.
But is that really a good reason for you to ignore me?
At this rate, you're going to die.
I am? Why?
The demon continent is a rather harsh place. For one, there isn't much of anything to eat. For another, it's absolutely swarming with monsters, especially compared to the central continent. And I know you can speak the language, but things work rather differently here.
Are you really confident you can survive?
The demon continent? What?
Hold on.
You mean that huge lump of land way out on the edge of the world?
Why would I be way the heck out there?
You got caught up in a huge magical disaster. You ended up being teleported here.
A magical disaster? Are you talking about that light I saw?
That's right. So that was some sort of teleportation spell.
Wait, I'm not the only one who got hit by that thing.
I wonder if everyone else back in Fitoa is all right.
Buena village is pretty far away from Roa, so it's probably fine.
But I'm still worried about my family.
You have any insight on that, buddy? Would you really believe my answer either way? You don't even want to listen to my advice.
Good point. You'd probably lie just for the fun of it. All I'm going to say is that everyone's praying for your safety. They all want you to make it back alive.
Well, sure.
Of course they would.
You really believe that?
Isn't there a part of you that thinks they might glad to have seen the last of you?
Yeah, I'd be lying if I said the thought hadn't crossed my mind.
By the end of my last life, nobody cared if I lived or died. And I've still got some self-esteem issues stemming from that.
Well, people care about you in this world.
You'd better make it back to them in one piece. Yeah. You're right.
I won't make any guarantees, but I think you'll stand a very good chance of getting back alive if you do follow my advice.
Wait. Before we get to that, I want to know why you're doing this. Why do you care so much about me? Heavens, you're persistent.
I just think things will be more fun if you stay alive, okay?
Is that not good enough? People who only care about having fun tend to be total scumbags, you know. Is that how things were in your last life? Pretty much.
I knew a few guys like that, and they all loved making other people dance like puppets for their own amusement. Well, I do enjoy a bit of puppetry now and again.
I can't deny that.
And what could possibly be so fun about watching me anyway? Maybe that wasn't the right choice of words.
You're very interesting, that's all.
I hardly ever get the chance to see someone from an entirely different world.
I'd like to help you meet all sorts of people and see what comes of it.
Great. So I'm the pet monkey and you're giving me some vague instructions to see if I can reach my goal.
That sound about right?
Sigh.
Look here. You haven't forgotten my original question, have you? What original question? Let me repeat myself then.
Are you confident you can survive here? Stranded in a dangerous, unfamiliar land?
No. Not really. Then maybe you'd be better off hearing me out. Like I said before, it's up to you if you want to follow my suggestions. All right.
Fine.
I get it. Go ahead, give me advice if you really want to. What was the point of this whole long-winded conversation anyway? You could have just told me what to do and saved us both a headache. Yes.
Now listen carefully, young Rudius.
Soon after you awake, you'll see a man. Rely on him, and do what you can to help him.
As these brief and final words echoed through the void, the blurred-out god abruptly disappeared.
Chapter 2.
The Supered.
When I woke up, it was already night.
A black sky full of stars stretched above me.
Shadows cast by a flame danced across the ground. I could hear the crackling of burning wood.
It seemed I was sleeping next to a bonfire, although I didn't remember making one, or even setting off on a camping trip. The last thing I did remember was the sky abruptly changing colors, and a wave of white light sweeping over us.
Oh, and then there was that dream. Not a very pleasant one.
Gah.
A jolt of fear ran through me, and I looked down at my body.
Fortunately, it wasn't the slow, useless lump of flesh I used to inhabit.
I was back in the young but strong form of Reduce.
Seeing that, my memories of the past began fading slightly, and a wave of pure relief washed over me.
To hell with that man god.
For a minute there, I'd felt like I was back in the bad old days. Seemed like I was going to get a bit more time in this world after all.
Thank goodness. I had a ton of things I still wanted to do here. Like cast aside my wizard status, for one thing. When I sat up, my back hurt. I'd been laid on the bare ground.
My immediate surroundings were a stretch of dry, cracked earth.
From what I could see, there was barely any vegetation at all.
Were there even no insects?
I heard nothing except the sound of the fire. It really was quiet out here.
I felt like any noise I made would be swallowed up by the total silence of the night. I couldn't remember having been in a place anything like this before. The kingdom of Arsura was covered in grasslands and forests after all.
Had that wave of white light done this? No, no. According to the man god, I'd been teleported. This was the demon continent presumably. A completely new and unfamiliar land. Somehow, that light had sent me. Wait. What about Gislen and Eris?
My first instinct was to jump to my feet and start looking for them. But just as I began moving, I noticed a girl sleeping on the ground behind me, one hand clutching at my shirt.
Her vivid red hair was unmistakable. It was Eris.
Eris Boreas Greyrat, the girl I'd been tutoring back in Fitoa. I'll skip the background story for now, but I'd been teaching her reading and arithmetic for 3 solid years at this point. She'd been a force of nature at first, spoiled, violent, and totally out of control. But I'd managed to navigate through some tricky events, such as rescuing her from would-be kidnappers and teaching her to dance before her birthday party.
Eventually, I'd earned her respect and trust.
Of course, she still punched and kicked me on a daily basis.
That was just the way she was. For some reason, Eris had some sort of cloak draped over her. I'd just been laid out in my clothes, but, oh well. The principle of ladies first probably applied here. My staff, Aqua Hartia, was also lying on the ground behind her.
Eris had given it to me as a present on my 10th birthday only a few days ago. In any case, she didn't have any obvious external injuries.
That was a relief. Where's Gislen, though?
Gislen Dedeldier was both our swordplay instructor and Eris's personal bodyguard. She was a fearsomely skilled beast warrior who'd been teaching me the basics of her style in exchange for a rudimentary education. The woman's brain was allegedly made of muscle, and she was definitely lagging behind Eris in her studies, but in an emergency like this, she'd be far more useful than the likes of me.
It was possible she'd made the fire and put that cloak over Eris.
I turned away from my sleeping student, and started looking for my master. Right away, I spotted someone sitting near the fire, whom I hadn't noticed before.
But it wasn't Gislen. It was a man. He was staring at me, still and silent, as if to size me up. I froze like a rabbit under a predator's glare. Despite my shock, I tried my best to study the man calmly.
He didn't seem to be wary of us. If anything, it was more like,
How could I put this?
Something about his body language reminded me of the way my sister used to slowly, timidly approach a cat she wanted to pet. Was he worried about frightening these children he'd stumbled across?
That seemed to indicate he wasn't hostile.
But just as I was breathing a sigh of relief, my mind picked up on a few alarming details. His hair was emerald green, his skin porcelain white, and he had something like a red jewel embedded in his forehead.
There was also a long scar running across his face.
His eyes were sharp, his features stern. Even at a glance, he looked like a dangerous man. Just to drive the point home, there was a 3-pronged spear lying by his side.
When I was very young, I'd been tutored in magic by a girl named Roxy who taught me many valuable, life-changing things.
One of the things she'd taught me concerned a certain race of demons, the Supid.
I remembered her words perfectly, even now. Don't talk to the Supid.
Don't go anywhere near them. I wanted to spring to my feet, grab Ares, and start running wildly.
But I managed to suppress that urge at the last moment. The man god's advice had popped into my head: rely on him, and do what you can to help him. I had absolutely no reason to trust that self-styled deity, of course.
Everything he said to me set off alarm bells, and now he'd left me here with this incredibly suspicious character.
How could I trust him? This guy was a Supid for crying out loud.
Roxy had explained in great detail just how terrifying and violent they were.
Maybe some sort of god wanted me to help him out.
Okay,
fine. But who was I going to trust here?
Some shady character I met in a dream, or my beloved master, Roxy? Roxy, obviously.
The question wasn't even worth thinking about. Which meant I should be running away now.
Then again, maybe that was why the advice was necessary in the first place.
If it weren't for that dream, I probably would have fled immediately.
But even if I did manage to get away somehow, what would my next move be?
I glanced at our surroundings for a second time. It was dark, everything was completely unfamiliar.
And the cracked earth around me was covered in jagged rocks.
If I took the man god at his word, this was the demon continent. That would mean I was a long way away from home.
Come to think of it, I'd had another odd dream earlier, although I'd almost forgotten it after that memorable chat with the man god.
I'd been flying across this world at a ferocious speed.
I swept past tall mountains, open seas, thick forests, and deep valleys, many places where I could have actually died. Maybe that hadn't been a dream, maybe I really had been teleported.
The demon continent thing seemed increasingly plausible. And of course, I didn't know where on the continent I was. If I ran off now, I'd be wandering aimlessly in the middle of a massive and foreign land. In the end, I didn't have much of a choice.
Even if Eris and I could get away from this man, we'd just end up hopelessly stranded in the middle of nowhere. Of course, there was always a chance that we'd find a village nearby when the sun came up.
But was it worth gambling everything on that? No. Of course not. I knew perfectly well how tough it was to find your way in unfamiliar country.
Calm down, man.
Deep breaths. You don't trust the man god.
Fine. But what about this guy?
Look at him carefully. Look at the expression on his face.
He's anxious.
Anxious, and a little resigned.
He's not some inhuman monster incapable of emotion, okay? Roxy had told me to steer clear of the Supid, but she'd never actually met one herself. I'd learned all about prejudice and discrimination in my old world, and I knew how witch hunts happened.
The Supids were feared, but maybe they were just misunderstood.
Roxy surely hadn't meant to lie to me, but there was a chance she had the wrong idea. My intuition told me this guy wasn't going to hurt us. He didn't look nearly as shady or malicious as the man god. Rather than Roxy's warning or the man god's advice, I decided to trust my own instincts. I didn't hate or fear this guy at first glance, his appearance was just a little intimidating.
In that case, it wouldn't hurt to talk. I'd make up my mind based on how that went.
Hello there, I called to him. After a pause, he responded with a brief, hello.
So far so good. What's next? Are you a servant of God or something? The man tilted his head in puzzlement.
I'm not sure what you mean by that, but I found you two here after you fell from the sky.
I know human children are delicate, so I made this fire to keep you warm. No mention of my faceless friend, huh? Was this guy not in on the divine plan?
Based on what the man god said about his motives, maybe watching me was only half the fun. Seeing how other people reacted to me was probably just as interesting.
In that case, this man really might be trustworthy. That was very kind of you. Thank you for helping us.
Are you blind, boy?
Now that was a peculiar question. What? No, my vision's perfect, actually. Did your parents not teach you about the Superd then?
My parents didn't, but my master did warn me to stay away from them at all costs. The man paused again, then spoke more slowly and carefully than before.
You're disregarding your master's words, you know.
The unspoken question, of course, was, I'm a Superd. Are you really okay with that?
The man seemed surprisingly insecure.
Aren't you afraid of me? Not afraid, no.
But I am a little suspicious of you. There was no need to say that aloud, of course. I think it would be impolite to fear a man who just helped me. You say the strangest things, child. There was a look of genuine bewilderment on his face now.
I didn't think I'd said anything particularly odd, but maybe the Superd took it for granted that everyone would run screaming at the sight of them. I'd learned a bit about the Laplace War, the 400-year conflict between humanity and demonkind that ended only a century ago.
I knew that the Superd had been shunned ever since it came to an end.
The world was slowly shedding its prejudices against other types of demons, but the Superd were definitely a special case. Every other race seemed to loathe them as passionately as the Japanese people hated American soldiers during World War II.
They were portrayed as something close to the embodiment of pure evil. Without my knowledge of racism from my old life, I probably would have shrieked in terror at the sight of one. The man said nothing. He tossed a twig into the fire and it popped loudly. Eris moaned at the sound and began stirring. She seemed on the edge of consciousness. Wait. That's not good. She's definitely going to make a scene. I should at least introduce myself before things get totally chaotic. I'm Rudius Greyrat. What's your name, sir?
Rudyard Superdia. Superdia was presumably the common last name used by all the Superds.
That was how things typically worked with the demonic peoples.
For the most part, only humans took family names, although there were a few eccentric exceptions among the other races. Likewise, Roxy's last name was Migadia, according to the Dictionary of Demonkind she sent me during my stint as Eris's tutor. Well, Rudyard, I think this young lady is going to wake soon. She can be very noisy at times, I'm afraid.
Let me apologize in advance. No need for that. I'm used to it.
Given her aggressive approach to life, there was a real risk Eris might take a swing at Rudyard the instant she laid eyes on him.
We needed to have a quick conversation while we had the chance.
Hopefully that would keep things from getting too hostile later on.
Pardon me. I'm going to move a little closer.
With a glance at Eris to make sure she wasn't waking up just yet, I scooted around the fire and settled down next to Rudyard.
Up close, I could make out his clothes in the faint, flickering light.
His embroidered vest and trousers seemed like some type of tribal garb, the sort of thing an indigenous person might have worn. Rudyard seemed more uncomfortable than anything else. But honestly, it was much less off-putting than the man-god's brand of pushy friendliness. I said, not to change the subject, but where are we at the moment? The Bayagoya region, in the northeast of the Demon Continent.
We're not far from the old Kishirasu Castle.
Oh.
I see. I'd seen Kishirasu Castle on a map once.
It was a long, long way away from Asura.
Why did we land all the way out here, I wonder? If you two don't know, I certainly wouldn't.
Yeah, I suppose not. I guess strange things can just happen when you're in a world with dragons and magic, but it didn't seem like a coincidence that we'd run into a major character like Perugius's lieutenant right before this happened.
For that matter, it could be that the man-god had played some part in things as well.
If we'd been caught up in this by sheer coincidence, it was a miracle we were even alive. Well, in any case, I'm very grateful that you helped us.
There's no need for gratitude. Just tell me where you hail from. We're from the kingdom of Asura on the central continent. The city of Roa in the Fitoa region specifically.
Asura? That's certainly a far-off land.
It certainly is. Not to worry though. I'll see you back there safe and sound.
The northeast of the Demon Continent was on the opposite side of the map from Asura.
In sheer distance, it was comparable to a trip from Paris to Las Vegas, And in this world, of course, you couldn't just hop on an airplane. Even sea travel was only possible on specific routes, so any intercontinental journey required lengthy detours over land. Do you have any idea what may have happened, boy? Well, the sky started glowing all of a sudden, then someone who called himself Ulmanfi the Radiant showed up and told us he'd come to stop some sort of abnormality.
We were still talking to him when this wave of bright, white light hit us. Next thing I knew, I was waking up here.
Ulmanfi? So, Perugius got involved?
The situation must have been truly grave then. You're lucky you were merely teleported. True enough. If that had been some sort of explosion, we'd both be dead.
I noticed Ruijerd hadn't seemed too surprised by the whole Perugius thing. Maybe it wasn't that unusual for our legendary hero to show up every now and again.
By the way, Ruijerd, have you ever heard of a man-god?
Mangard?
Doesn't sound familiar.
Is that someone's name?
Never mind. It's not really important. It didn't feel like he was lying to me, and I couldn't imagine why he'd feel the need to.
In any case, the kingdom of Asura, is it?
It's all right, I wouldn't ask you to take us all that way. If you could just escort us to the nearest town, I think we... No. A supered warrior never goes back on his word. Ruijerd's words were firm, his voice full of stubborn pride. It was enough to make me want to trust him, even putting aside the man-god's advice.
Right now, however, I needed to stay skeptical.
But we're talking about a journey to the other side of the world.
Don't worry yourself about that, child.
With that, the man reached out and timidly patted me on the head. I saw relief on his face when I didn't jerk away from his hand.
Was this guy just fond of children maybe? Still, we weren't talking about a 10-minute stroll back home here. I couldn't exactly take his promises at face value right now.
Think of it this way, the man said. Do you know the language here?
Do you have any money?
Do you know the roads?
Oh. Hadn't even occurred to me until now, but I'd been speaking in the human tongue this whole time, and this demon man was responding fluently.
Interesting. I can speak demon god actually. And I'm a competent magician, so I can earn money for myself. If you take us to a town, I'll find out where we need to go. I wanted to steer this conversation toward a polite refusal if possible.
Ruijerd himself might be trustworthy, but I didn't like the idea of things playing out exactly as the man God wanted. If my cautious words hurt him, the man didn't let it show.
I see. At least allow me to protect you then.
Abandoning such young children would blemish the honor of the supered.
Well, I wouldn't want to disgrace such a proud people. Not to worry. We've already taken care of that ourselves.
I chuckled a little, and Ruijerd's lips curved upward slightly. Unlike the man god's hollow, disturbing grin, there was some genuine warmth behind his smile. In any case, I'll take you to the village where I'm staying tomorrow morning.
All right.
I didn't trust that so-called god further than I could throw him, but this man